when playing against a prestigious opponent, almost as if they have this buff or this small advantage, and it's only because of their prestige itself. And this gives them an advantage in multiple matchups against other professional players, because some players won't take full advantage of their matchup, of their, say, champion matchup, in that maybe they have this counter pick, yet they don't actually get up in CS, and they have the early lane pressure, and suddenly they just don't take full advantage of their champion's kit in order to counter the prestigious opponent's champion. And so you're into this kind of mental lock or this mental block state of not being able to confront the enemy just because you're afraid of their skill level. And so this falls into a pattern of playing scared or defensive, right? And so if you're constantly looking towards playing defensive, well, then you aren't going to be playing or making any plays as proactively, right? You're going to be playing consistently defensively, and so you're just on this reaction mode instead. And as with any sport, as with any discipline that you want to be good at, you have to be proactive in some sense. And so if you're constantly scared, then you've kind of already lost, right? And so this falls into this pattern of playing against someone who is just really good at the game, and everyone that's playing against them knows that. And so it ends up that oftentimes you will see teams kind of planning their focus around bringing this opponent down, and that their entire plan is, okay, we're going to try and gank this guy because he's going to carry the enemy team, right? That's who they play through consistently. So we're going to try and just bog this guy down and smash him, and then we just smash the rest of the team, right? That's how that works. Well, that also makes you predictable, right? And some of the best teams and best players as well too will be able to absorb that pressure because they're just so used to it, right? They know exactly that you're going to try and shut them down, especially if it's a skill mismatch of, hey, maybe this mid laner is way better than this mid laner, so you're going to try and influence that matchup so that he doesn't get smashed. And so this becomes very predictable, and you kind of fall into a trap of playing against someone who is very legendary, and that, well, they don't actually have to do anything at that point. They could just play safe, and they will still absorb all the pressure, and then their allies, in the other sides of the lanes, in top lane or bot lane, they can play even further up and more aggressive, and suddenly they end up winning their lanes. And so this not only translates to in-game, but also even before the game starts in the ban phase, it becomes a problem. Because if you're trying to focus down this guy and say, oh, well, he's going to get this matchup and this matchup and this matchup because of these are the champions that he plays, like, okay, we can't get shit on by these three champions, so we're just going to ban him out. And then suddenly that works wonders for the rest of their team, and that becomes a team-wide buff instead of just one player buff. And so that's what helps his entire team, the fact that you're so focused on him that he can then allow his team to take advantage of your entire team. And so this becomes a problem not only because of that aspect, but because people think that they could ban out these legendary players. I mean, they don't become legendary just because they were good in one split. No one calls a legendary player because he was good in one split. No, it's a continued legacy. It's something to where they can prove that they have actually done the hard miles and done the hard work in order to get to the level that they're at. And that doesn't just happen over one split. That's a continued thing. And so you try and ban this guy out who's existed through multiple meta, it's probably not gonna happen, right? So if you do try and hyper focus on that, then it just becomes a massive problem for your entire team. And then there's the other aspect of hyper focusing on a player's micro. say you're playing in the top lane and suddenly you're worried about, okay, oh, when's he going to use his Q? When's he going to use his E on me? Like, okay, I need to watch out for this as I go for this CS because, you know what, actually, I'm not even going to go for that because he might do this and this. And so you suddenly get so hyper-focused on this guy's micro that you ignore everything else on the map because you're just so scared of this enemy laner that you forget maybe that there's a TP play that you could have done bot. That bot lane is super far pushed up and they have all their CC ready and the junglers down there. You could have done a TP down to the bot lane bush and then flanked them instead. But no, you were super worried about this guy's micro for some reason. And so as you focus on someone's micro more and more, then you forget about the plays that you can make. And it's not only about the enemy that you're facing against within the lane, or, you know, if you're a jungler against enemy jungler or whatever, it's that you have to take into consideration all of the other enemies that you aren't directly facing at the moment. But not only that, you have to see what your allies are doing as well too, because yes, if you know what the enemy is doing, then you can play pretty defensively, right? That's a defensive mechanism because you know what to expect, so you can kind of play off that and absorb that pressure or just not fall into that trap, right? And then there's also your allies, which you have to pay attention to know when a play is about to happen and when one of your allies are setting up for a play. And so if you're so hyper-focused on someone's micro, then you're already lagging behind 5 seconds, 10 seconds on a play. And as with League of Legends, we all know that to be a really good player, you have to be 5 to 10 seconds ahead of whatever play is going to be made. You have to know ahead of time, okay, this is how we're going to set this up. This is how the team wants to play. Okay, we're going to go do this teleport bot lane, and then we're going to maybe get 1 or 2 kills, and then after that we get the dragon, and then I go back top lane. So you need to know these things. And if you're just so focused on your enemy laner because he's such a legendary player, then you've already kind of lost part of the war in that. And I think solo queue is one of the small good examples, although a bit of an over-exaggeration compared to competitive play. But it's the fact of maybe you're facing a popular streamer, and so suddenly everyone tries to go to this streamer's lane because they want to keep him down because he's very good at the game. And so he just ends up changing his play to accommodate that because he knows people are going to do that. And so this is kind of the different mindset that a prestigious player can get into as well too, to counteract whatever pressure that he does have to absorb. And then there's also the fact of, you know, playing just regular solo queue and you end up looking at someone's rank through, you know, OPGG or whatever website, and you look at the opposing rank and you're just like, oh wow, okay, he's a higher rank than me and he has an 80% win rate on Graves with 20 games. It's like, oh fuck, how am I going to win this one, you know? And some people get very influenced by that, and that's one way, a small way of, you know, getting influenced by someone who is good at the game or appears good at the game, and you haven't even faced the guy yet. And so you're already psychologically psyching yourself out. And you see this happen even on the professional stage. One of the most famous examples is, of course, Reckless versus Uzi, right? Reckless has like been on record saying that, yeah, like for some reason I just get this mental block against Uzi, and I can't really lane how I want to lane against him. And you can see that when he does actually lane against Uzi. You can actually see Reckless playing more defensive than he normally would and playing more scared and giving up more CS, and suddenly this becomes a significant advantage for Uzi. And if you can't try to match his pressure in some regard, then you're going to lose even harder than you normally would. And so this is kind of the buff that Uzi gets when he plays against another ADC. And that's the same thing with Faker against, I mean, let's be honest, almost everyone else, right? Is that maybe taking trades he shouldn't, which would put him in this compromised position, maybe against the enemy jungler or maybe against a skill shot, and you as the enemy mid laner are just thinking, wait, what are you doing? None of this makes sense. Why would you do that? You shouldn't be getting away with that, but because you did it and because it was so cocky, you did get away with it. And so it becomes this psychological bluff game that he tries to play against other people, and because his mentality is so fucking strong, he gets away with a lot of the things that he shouldn't. And that's what makes Faker so great and so much greater than the rest of the mid lane talent pool. And then, of course, you have his skill dodging. And some people just feel like they don't even want to use a skill shot against him because he's so good at dodging. So it's like, oh, well, I might not actually hit him with this, so I'm just going to save my mana, because if I keep doing all these skill shots and missing, I'm going to get my mana depleted, and then he's going to all-in me because I won't have a good spell rotation in a long extended fight. So I'm going to get screwed if I do that. So I'll just hang on and hang back, and suddenly he gets this advantage because you aren't trying to take advantages from him. And so the whole point is that these prestigious players, they end up getting this small buff. It's almost like, you know, in those fantasy books where the hero goes and fights the dragon, and the dragon has this buff, dragon fear, right, where it instills fear within the hearts of humans or orcs or anyone. And that's one of their powers, is that they just instill fear. And then of course they have the whole fucking fire breathing thing, which is pretty sick, but it's this fear that already helps them win the battle just from the outset. And that's what kind of exists with these legendary players. They have this small buff, this fear that they put and instill into other people that play against them, and that already helps them win this psychological battle, and then they can take advantage of that. So you can already see it's not just that a good player is good, that he is mechanically great, or maybe his macro is also great as well too. It's the fact that just because he has this name, just because he has the name Faker or Uzi, he already gets a buff because of the legacy that he's already built. And that is very legendary and sick.